So I thought long and hard about this, but the Nintendo Switch 2 is gonna be the #1 console. And here's why. So everyone has their opinions about the Nintendo Switch 2, some valid and some completely off base. With everything we know now prior to release, I have educated and founded basis to believe that the Switch 2 is gonna be the #1 priority console, even for developers. Now, if you've seen the title, I wanna preface this by saying that this is not a Nintendo Glaze video. My thoughts on this are based on some valid experience following Nintendo and even some market analysis. There's multiple layers to this, so hear me out. So last week was rich with news and updates regarding the Nintendo Switch 2 games lineup, and we even got a glimpse of what chip is in the Nintendo Switch 2, or at least is likely to be inside, and we'll get into that a little bit later too. But there's one thing that stood out to me as a really good reason to expect the success, and even a switching of tides when it comes to Nintendo's newest handheld console. Naoki Hamaguchi, the series director for Final Fantasy VII Remake, dropped a heartfelt interview for a creator's voice, talking about the past releases of the game, and most notably, the current upcoming integrated game for Switch 2. In the video, he talks about how the first video game system he ever played was by Nintendo, similar to a lot of us. But that is a little bit more important than it seems at face value. So everyone knows that the Switch 2 is a major upgrade to the prior system, which obviously opens up a lot of new doors for new titles. That's actually the main reason Naoki felt inspired to bring the Final Fantasy VII Remake series over to Nintendo's platform. FF7 Remake Integrate looks incredible, and with these recent side-by-side comparison images of the Nintendo Switch version versus the PS4 version, it's pretty clear to see that this actually looks quite improved from a graphics or maybe even a lighting perspective at the very least. My old PS4 had a hard time playing that original Remake game. And I'm talking overheating at least once a day, but maybe that was just my unit, I don't know. The new Switch version is looking great, and none of these games are even using the new DLSS yet, so that's a whole nother story. So to bring this together, it was an awesome walk down memory lane, but he left us with some really interesting points. Everyone knows that the Switch 2 is a major upgrade to the prior system in terms of performance, which obviously opens up a lot of new doors for new titles, right? In terms of that increased performance, NVIDIA didn't give us much other than the claims of 10 times performance of the Switch 1 from his custom chip, which is all but officially announced given the fact that this info comes from manufacturer shipping data and it's assumed legit. That's clearly a lot more RAM than the 4 GB of LPDDR4 RAM that was in the Switch 1. Final Fantasy VII Remake director says that all that new RAM really made it a lot easier to port the game over. That right there is a little token to hold on to. We're getting closer, so just follow me. So wrapping up everything that we learned in the interview, he also hopes that fans of Super Smash Bros. Will play and learn more about Cloud and Sephiroth, because that's how we all got to our first introduction to the characters, right? Via Super Smash Bros. That part is just really adding to the full circle narrative he was building. So now, the biggest thing that we got from this interview, in my opinion, was the way that Final Fantasy VII Remake was framed as series for the Switch 2. We can truly make an educated guess that that means we can expect there to be more Final Fantasy VII titles for the Switch 2. I mean, that sounds like a confirmation to me. Rebirth and Part 3 will very likely be on the Switch 2 eventually. This alongside the crazy ports announced during the Nintendo Direct like Cyberpunk 2077, Elden Ring, Yakuza 0, and more also give me insight on how developers of these more graphic intensive video games view the potential of the Switch now. The power to run the games has also been a major setback for more support when it comes to the beefier games in the past. Another thing that we already know is that the Nintendo Switch 2 is not only the most expensive Nintendo system ever, but it's more expensive than the Xbox Series X and the PS5, if you bought them today, that is. If Nintendo turns out to be the company to watch like I think it will, who's to say that prices won't increase on upcoming games and systems from Sony and Microsoft as well? Especially since those two have mostly been focusing on pushing the lines of photorealistic gaming graphics, and with hardware in a place that seems to me like it's actually slowing down or hitting a point of diminishing returns a bit, that's gonna put a hold on the Sony PS6 and whatever Xbox next gen console is if they really wanna separate themselves. They're gonna need to wait or create the new technology to really, spread that gap from the Switch 2. I know that sounds crazy, so obviously I'm not alluding to the Switch 2 actually competing neck and neck, but with the performance being good enough per se, developers may want to cut back on that cutting edge approach, focus more on bringing more entertaining titles to Nintendo's audience instead. They could see more growth for less stress. Little food for thought. Now, other breaking news that supports my idea of the Switch 2 becoming the top dog for the near future is an article by Go Nintendo stating that analyst says level of Switch 2 third-party support is something we haven't seen on Nintendo hardware, maybe ever. And I gotta agree, we all typically buy Nintendo consoles to play, you guessed it, Nintendo games. But during the reveal of the Switch 2, the amount of cooperation of Nintendo and various third-party developers and publishers, it shines a little lens on what might be a new renaissance for Nintendo's approach. I've always had this weird pipe dream that we finally see some more mature first-person shooter titles like Call of Duty on Switch 2. Before, there wasn't much hope with Nintendo's online gaming being literally silent. Maybe we can revisit that now that there's a game chat mode and a stronger chip. I mean, at least Warzone on handheld Switch, that would be a blast. But Nintendo might not be able to charge us for that, so I don't know. Hey, just a man with a dream here. Now, like I said in the beginning of the video, let's talk about that new chip. We actually have some pretty awesome news regarding that alleged chip. Well, actually, a whole freaking motherboard for the Nintendo Switch as well. In a video by YouTuber Geekerwan, who appears to just drop fire one-off videos and leave the internet for years at a time, well, did it again and walked us through his acquiring of a Switch 2 motherboard on eBay. Yes, eBay of all places, but it looks really legit. The chip itself was revealed to be a Samsung-produced T293, with the GPU spec'd as a 1536 Ampere and the CPU spec'd with 8 A78C cores, clocking at 1.1 GHz in handheld mode, and allegedly even less in docked mode at 1 GHz. So he wasn't able to power up and run an actual Switch 2 system itself, but what it boils down to in terms of comparison performance, GPU tests revealed that in docked mode, we're looking at similar performance to a GTX 1050 Ti, and faster than an A18 Pro chip in the newer iPhones, which has even outperformed the M1 chip in certain testing. Now, it's clearly nowhere near the performance of the Xbox Series X nor the PS5, but we really shouldn't look at it that way. It's a wireless handheld, and we literally just got more than one fan, so let's just take it one step at a time here. In wireless mode, the benchmarks rank similar to the Steam Deck's performance, but it's actually a little bit closer to a GTX 7050 Ti in all actuality though. But this is all benchmark testing though. We have yet to factor in Nintendo's expert level optimization support and simple CPU structure that allows developers to pinpoint the best ways to optimize their games, which will no doubt give actual gaming performance that I'm sure will blow expectations and comparisons out of the water with the ports that they introduced to the platform. Plus, the upscaling is likely going to outshine the Steam Deck by a fair amount as well, in my opinion. But in terms of comparison to the Switch 1, this thing is an astronomical improvement. Well, specifically, according to him, 698% in dock mode and 752% upgrade in wireless mode. And that's really how we should compare it. We should all just focus on being better versions of ourselves from yesteryear, right? Promise I'm not coping. Now, he runs this thing through a scholar level of physical and digital analysis, and if you like to nerd out on things like that, you should definitely check out his video because I was very impressed. And I hope the ninjas do not chase after our boy. So let's bring it all in, man. Why is this Switch 2 gonna be the #1 system? Now, I understand that the benchmarks might scare you guys a little bit, but I wouldn't count the Switch 2 out just yet. I believe it's gonna have some of the funnest games. It's less about the console being more powerful than the PS5 or Xbox X series. It's not that. It really is the fact that the Switch is finally valid enough to be in the conversation at all. Once we get well into the cycle of the Switch 2, I think we'll get far more support for labor-intensive titles than before. Now, there is some room to grow, but I think the Switch 2 really is on the right track this time, especially as a wireless handheld console. 20 years ago, the Game Boy could never have dreamed of where we are today. Thanks for watching, man, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments below what you think about this concept. Is Nintendo about to take over this year? Is it gonna affect the whole gaming industry for who knows how long? I wanna hear your thoughts in the comments, man. And if you're into gaming and tech videos, be sure to subscribe because we got videos dropping non-stop, man, so just tune in. I'll catch you guys on the next one, and peace.